Welcome to NCPDP, Unscripted, the podcast where healthcare meets real talk. Each episode, we will dive into unscripted conversations with industry leaders, changemakers, and innovators, discussing the challenges, breakthroughs, and behind-the-scenes stories you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're on your morning commute or taking a break between meetings, settle in because it's time to get unscripted.
Kristol, welcome to NCPDP Unscripted. Excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so first of all, I know you're very involved at NCPDP, but there may be some listeners who don't know you. So we'll start with who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Kristol Chism, and I work for Optum Insight and Director of Industry Relations for them, but primarily my role is standards, regulatory, policy, all of those ugly, geeky things that most people don't
Right.
don't like to do as a pharmacist. So I'm a pharmacist by degree, but just really enjoy the policy aspect of things and the standards aspect. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I still remember when we first met, and it was Richard Brooks that actually
was.
introduced us.
Right.
And I remember the first time we chatted, and I was like, oh, she's going to love NCPDP, and she's going to be a great fit. So it's been great to kind of see you grow and, thrive here at NCPDP. So thank you for everything that you do.
Really happy to be here.
Yeah, so I want to dive into, so you have been on Strategic Planning Committee and specifically leading one of our subcommittees. So I kind of want to start there. I know some people may know kind of the Strategic Planning Committee, others don't. So maybe high level explain, what the Strategic Planning Committee is, and then we'll do a little deeper dive.
Perfect, yeah. So Strategic Planning Committee is obviously part of the NCPDP structure, if you will. The Board of Trustees really has the focus of where they want NCPDP to go. And I kind of look at the SPC as the working part of that.
Yeah.
They really kind of bring those ideas and concepts to life. And as a part of what SPC does is they then look at all of the things that the board would like to do, the objectives that the board is trying to accomplish, and they break that down into KPIs. And then from those KPIs, they kind of decide who do we need to really do the work, to really dig in and figure out how to make those KPIs really come to life. So as a part of that, the SPC this cycle, has put together a clinical data exchange subcommittee. And some of the subcommittee is made up of SBC members, it's made up of board members, but then we've got members that are external to that as well. So they're not necessarily a part of those two groups. And really the whole point behind this particular subcommittee is to figure out, do pharmacists need, or I should say, do pharmacists have the clinical data at their fingertips that they really need to be able to exchange? As you know, and hopefully some of the listeners know as well, pharmacy is really diving in headfirst into clinical services, those things like test and treat, more into immunization counseling as opposed to just the immunization services, and even independent prescribing. So looking at like contraceptives or HIV PEP and PrEP. So all of those things are where the community pharmacy is really filling that gap where physicians are just not in right now. And so in order to do that, coming full circle back to the reason that we have the subcommittee, is they need to have the data, right? They need to be able to exchange that clinical information bidirectionally. And so we looked at, the subcommittee kind of looked at, does the standards contain the things that need to be exchanged? And if we don't, how do we correct that? And so that's really kind of the impetus of the group and what we've been working on. Also, as a part of that, just to dive in a little bit deeper, we really looked at a couple of other things that the board is trying to accomplish around TEFCA. So what is TEFCA? What does it do? How do pharmacists get involved? Because this is something that HHS was very interested in, specifically through ASTP. Really interested in to figure out, how do we get pharmacy more involved in that process? So that's another thing that the subcommittee has been trying to do. And as a part of that particular KPI, we recently did a webinar, and let me go back even a step further.
Yeah. What is TEFCA?
Yeah. So let me start.
Yeah.
Let me start with what we tried to do first.
Yeah.
There was a lot of questions around what is TEFCA. We don't know.
Yeah.
Pharmacy, by and large, was not really involved in TEFCA, and we needed to figure out what did they know.
Yeah.
What did pharmacy know? What did they not know? And then how do we, NCPDP, and specifically this subcommittee, fill the gaps, right? So we did a survey back in August with the member survey, like normally happens with NCPDP. And as of late September, we got our results around that and found out, I don't think anybody was surprised when we got the results, but we found out that there was very, very little knowledge from pharmacy and specifically from NCPDP members around TEFCA. TEFCA, Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, and part of TEFCA is QHIN, so QHIN, so Qualified Health Information Network. We wanted to help members have a leg up and go forward.
Yeah.
And so we put together a webinar to just say, hey, TEFCA 101, right?
Yeah.
That's not what it was called, but that was basically what it was.
Yeah.
And so we got Sequoia to come and help us, and Sequoia is really the authorizing agent, if you will, for QHINs. We got a QHIN to actually come and speak, so we, SureScripts, one of our QHINs, to come and speak. And then we got a pharmacy perspective. So we had someone from Thrifty White come and join us and really talk about what it means from a pharmacy perspective. And then, of course, you graciously were on our webinar and talked about what does it mean from an NCPDP perspective and really what's next. So as a part of that webinar, we did a pre and post knowledge uptake, right? So try to figure out what the members knew, or I should say the attendees. It wasn't just members, which was exciting. It wasn't just members. What did the attendees know about TEFCA? And so we just did a quick pulse check. What do you know? What do you not know? And we found out at the very beginning that a lot of the people attending that webinar, and we had about 175 people that were signed up for the webinar, which is pretty good numbers. But we had a lot of the folks say, have no idea what TEFCA is, like zero knowledge of TEFCA. And by the end of the webinar, I was very proud to say we had a lot of people, actually 80% of the people had a baseline uptick in what they learned from
fantastic.
the webinar. So I think the webinar was good, it was needed, and I think it really showcased not just where we were having some gaps, but that there's a lot more to come. There's a lot more information that we can potentially provide around TEFCA, around QHINs, and to that point as well, we decided to do a Q&A at the work group, at NCPDP work group around that. So again, just to increase the knowledge of the members.
That's fantastic. And, you know, I think kind of taking a step back, right, it's so important to educate people about TEFCA because it really is kind of this, nationwide data exchange, right? I think we've talked a lot about how, providers, doctors, right, health plans, others are connected to TEFCA now. So if you, you go see your doctor, say I'm from Arizona, right, but I end up in California, and they can pull some of my records. And what we're trying to do is educate pharmacists, like you said, and pharmacies on, if you're going to do these clinical services, how are you going to get information, but also share back? And I think that's just so important. So, So curious, because I love that we've got a subcommittee focused on this, and I think, kind of that first step of educating, right, on that. I think some of the work also was a little bit of a continuation of, like, we had a VBA subcommittee, right, that looked at our standards and said, here's data, right, clinical data that can be used. I think the thing that I always hear is a lot of the clinical data is in the EHR, right? And so how do we get that information out? I know you were involved on the HL7 side too in another committee, and hopefully get this right, under Da Vinci, which is one of their accelerators, the Clinical Advisory Committee, correct?
Right.
Is that,
That's right.
yeah. So we'd love for you to explain to our audience kind of what that is and, why they want a pharmacist on there.
Yeah.
So
The Clinical Advisory Council, is a part of the Da Vinci Accelerator, and a lot of people may not know Da Vinci Accelerators, but it's a part of HL7, and as a part of that, they were trying to literally accelerate. That's exactly why those little side shoots came about. Da Vinci being one of them, Codex being another one that some of the viewers may be familiar with. And as a part of that, they wanted to understand, because Da Vinci does hit on a lot of the clinical aspect, right? The clinical data piece. They wanted to understand from clinicians, directly from clinicians, what does that look like, and how do clinicians feel about the way the data is being exchanged today, what improvements need to happen or need to take place. And I was asked, graciously accepted, to be a part as a pharmacist. So that's been a really interesting journey, listening to a lot of, the only pharmacist, I will say, on the Clinical Advisory Council. And so listening to a lot of physicians, a lot of nurses, explaining where they're at in the clinical journey. The biggest piece right now that they're trying to tackle is EPAs, right? Electronic prior authorizations. That's a huge piece from a medical standpoint. Of course, if anybody has ever had to struggle through that, it can definitely be a struggle, both from the patient side and from the prescriber side. And what they're trying to do right now is mainly on the medical side, but drugs, the drug EPA is coming. We know it's coming. So it's going to be interesting how all of that plays out when the rule comes to fruition. But yeah, that's kind of what the council does, is really just shepherding and fostering some of those clinical ideas and making sure that the clinician's perspective is taken into account.
That's great. That's great. So I know you also sit on the Sequoia Project Pharmacy Interoperability Work Group, and you're, like I said, kind of doing a lot of this great work. How do you see that fitting in with with our subcommittee, and kind of what's next for you guys now that you've done this TEFCA webinar? I know there's kind of talk about is there a clinical standard, right? Or do we work with others that maybe have some? Just curious, kind of where you're seeing the trends going and what you're thinking about is.
And so Sequoia Project is the Interoperability Matters, specifically the pharmacy work group around the Interoperability Matters, just put out their use cases for the general population to kind of see and to get their hands on. I think that's going to be a really important feedback from the industry of did we hit it? Did we get the right use cases? Did we get the right clinical information spoken to within those use cases? So that's going to be important. Pharmacy Health HIT, the Pharmacy HIT Collaborative, has also been doing some wonderful work around that. We've got a couple task groups that are also doing some fantastic work, really looking at our standards, clinical data, the pharmacist care plan. There's a lot of different aspects that kind of come into play there. And I think from a clinical, just truly from a clinical data perspective, our standards have it pretty much right, and we're excited that they do have it pretty much right. Now, standards are always evolving as clinical expectations evolve. The standards are going to have to evolve with it, right? So you've got US CDI that comes out every single year. We're getting ready to look at USCDI 7, which has 30 new elements, right? So there's a lot of really evolving things, and that's part of what this subcommittee is looking at, is taking all of that into consideration, what Sequoia is doing, what HL7 is doing with Da Vinci, what Pharmacy Health IT Collaborative is doing, what the task groups are doing, putting all of that together, learning how to collaborate between all of those pieces, which I think we could probably talk about collaborate a little bit too, but learning how to collaborate between all of those entities, all those organizations, and all of the wonderful documentation that is being published, which Pharmacy HIT just put out their information as well. The task group is getting ready to publish their information here after work group. So there's a lot of really great things that we can take a look at. I think the standards, like I said, I think they are fitting very nicely into where we need to be. But we'll kind of see where it all goes together. If we need to evolve, then we evolve. That's the beauty of NCPDP, of making sure that we're looking at everything and fitting it all in. So
Let's talk about Collaborate real
Yeah,
quick, because
that
we
was
just came out of
fun.
that.
We
So,
did.
we did just do a new initiative called NCPDP Collab. I know we had specific use cases, but I remember walking over to your table and you were actually talking TEFCA, which I love. So, talk to me a little bit about that and the collab, and maybe is there a use case that we should be talking about at our collab initiative?
Yeah, so collab was really fun. And if the viewers didn't get to participate, there will be information,
Yes.
I'm certain, as the outcome from the organization from what we did today.
Yeah.
But so I was at the table. We were talking about one of the use cases, which is pharmacy product locator.
Yeah.
And we were just talking through, what does that look like? How do you do that? How do you manage the data, and how does it go back and forth? And I said, well, TEFCA should be a part of all that clinical exchange. And they were like, what's a TEFCA?
Love it.
And so we got to do a little bit of education around that. So it was fun. But I think the use cases that we had this time were spot on. I think there's absolutely will continue to be use cases in the future. I know that in the future they're looking at perhaps the e-care plan, the pharmacist e-care plan, as one of the use cases, which I think is going to be great. Collab's wonderful. Come and participate. It's a lot of fun.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, as we wrap things up, just kind of looking ahead, you've talked a lot about this advancing role of the pharmacist. I think, clearly NCPDP, kind of saw that from the board perspective, right, that we need to really focus on that. I think a lot of our subcommittees and SPC has really been focused on that. So how can NCPDP members stay engaged in this work, things that maybe folks should be paying attention to in this area, and then, obviously in your kind of policy and standards role, anything else you want to just share with our listeners on all of this? Yeah,
so just from a policy perspective, we're of course watching a lot of this evolve. Immunizations was a big one, right? As ACIP kind of did a little bit of change this year, and the states wanted to go in some different directions, because a lot of times the states, the protocols and things of that nature are tied to what ACIP does and to what CDC does. And so the states have decided to take that onto their own shoulders and to do some changes there. But we're seeing that kind of across the board. We know that currently there's not a federal pharmacist as a provider kind of thing, right? So ECAPS is the closest thing that potentially we are going to get. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved yet this year, but that's a good one that is potentially upcoming. We'll see. Cross our fingers, right? But the states have decided they weren't going to wait from a federal perspective and have started to do their own thing. So we're starting to see a lot more, just like I was saying before, the independent prescribing and the test and treat and just scope expansion in general, which is fantastic. And so again, it's not just scope, but it's also the reimbursement piece as well, right? So not only can they legally do these things, we're starting to see a lot more reimbursement, both from a government perspective as well as from a private perspective, which is awesome. And so that's really where I see a lot of this going. We have to continue to have that clinical data. We have to continue to move those things forward, and policy is absolutely helping to push that forward. So that's great.
Excellent. Well, Kristol, thank you so much for joining me today, and again, thank you for all of your work that you do. I know you've been moving a lot of initiatives forward, so really, really excited to have a chance to talk with you. So thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
That's a wrap on this episode of NCPDP Unscripted. Thanks for joining us as we explore the voices and ideas driving innovation in healthcare. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have topic ideas you'd love to hear us cover, we want to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and stay unscripted. Our podcast is proudly sponsored by Marks Productions.